Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for tuning in this evening for our online Bible study. Let's get into it. I welcome you. If you are new to this study, I'm Pastor Dave St. Aubin, and it's a joy to be with you here this evening. Tonight, we will be looking at the book of Ezekiel, chapters 4 and 5. So I invite you to grab your Bibles, open them up to Ezekiel 4, grab something to take some good notes with, grab a beverage, and grab a snack. Let's get into it. Well, again, good evening and welcome, and thanks for tuning in. I do pray that your day has been going well. Pray that your week has been going well so far, and certainly do welcome you back to another evening of study as we journey through the Bible together, one chapter at a time. We are well underway here in the book of Ezekiel. We've made it now to chapter 4 already, and tonight we're going to be looking at two chapters, 4 and 5, and chapter 4 begins this next major section within the book of Ezekiel that'll take us through chapter 24, and this is the beginning of these oracles of judgment on Judah and on Jerusalem for their sin. So this section of the book, it contains different prophecies that Ezekiel delivered from the beginning of his ministry around 593 BC to the fall of Jerusalem, which was around 586 BC. And all of these prophecies deal with this coming destruction of the city, of the temple, and all of the calamity that is related to that. So here begins Ezekiel's prophecies that are directed towards other individuals. And these messages of doom that are to come are intended to really dismantle the theology that was in place in Jerusalem at this time by just undermining these four pillars that Judah's false sense of security was built on. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, the people of Jerusalem, remember when we looked in Jeremiah, the people in Jerusalem had this false sense of security that this could never happen to us. This will never happen to us. So they had these four pillars of false security. One was God's covenant with Israel, right? The people thought, well, God had made this covenant with us. He will never break it. God's commitment to his land, where the people thought God had given us this promised land. He would never remove it from us. God's commitment to Jerusalem, where the people thought, well, the temple is here and God dwells in the temple. God would never do anything to this city. And God's covenant with David that there would be a successor of kings coming out of the line of David that would continue to rule on the throne in Jerusalem. And all of this was it was false security for the people of Israel because they thought this would never happen to us. God will never punish us. God would never remove his temple. God would never stop the line of David with those sitting on the throne. God would never. And so just as Jeremiah had warned the people that this was coming, Ezekiel here looks to dismantle this false sense of security, this false theology that God would never. So chapters 4 and 5 that we'll look at tonight, 6 and 7 that we'll look at tomorrow, they all focus on Ezekiel's initial warnings to the people. And he's going to group several symbolic acts together. We're going to see them tonight that picture the destruction of Jerusalem. And then when we get to chapters 6 and 7, we're going to look at these discourses that he gives that will further expand on this subject of Jerusalem's destruction. Now remember, at this point, Ezekiel can't speak. God has closed his mouth, so he is, in a sense, he's mute. He's unable to speak. And as Ezekiel tries to present this image to the people, remember in the minds of the exiles, they believe that they would return to the promised land soon. Jeremiah had told them 70 years. The false prophets had told them 7 or less, 4. So again, there's a lot of false security here. Ezekiel is ministering to the people, had this false belief that they were going to be returning soon, that God's not going to allow the Babylonians to destroy the city, to destroy the temple. God closed Ezekiel's mouth. That was last night, chapter 3, verse 26. So these oracles that he's delivering, these are acted out. It's almost like a mime, right? Delivering some type of a street theater to the people. But these symbolic actions that we're going to see here tonight from Ezekiel, during his inability to speak, these are testimonies to the people of their past wickedness. It's a chastisement of the whole nation, Israel, and it's a prophetic announcement of the siege by the Babylonians to come. So let's get right into it here. Open up your Bible to Ezekiel chapter 4. If you don't have a Bible with you, not a problem. As always, all the verses are up here on the screen for you so you can follow along. Take some good notes tonight, and let's start with the first 3 verses, which focus on, remember, he's acting out now because he can't talk. We're going to see the use of this brick plate. So verse 1. God is still speaking here. Now, Son of Man, and we talked about that. We've seen that phrase many times already, and we'll see it many more throughout this book. Son of Man, take a block of clay, put it in front of you, and draw the city of Jerusalem on it. So God is instructing Ezekiel to construct this model of Jerusalem under attack. Ezekiel was to build this model of the city using a clay brick to represent the city. Now, the Hebrew word translated for brick, it has a couple different meanings. It describes like a clay tablet that people would write official documents on or correspondence, but it was also the same word used for just a common building brick. So this would have been a brick that was out of mud. It would have been dried in the sun. It wasn't kiln fired. This would have been set out in the sun to dry. So it's a sun-dried brick. These were often 2 feet long and a foot wide. So it gives you a visual of what this platform that Ezekiel is going to be drawing on looks like a 2x1 patio brick. Verse 2. So draw out the city of Jerusalem and then lay siege to it. Erect siege works against it. Build a siege ramp up to it. Set up camps against it. Put battering rams all around it. So Ezekiel is to draw the city and then build this model of the siege of the city with these siege works, with an earthen siege ramp and camps of Babylonian soldiers and battering rams. It'd be similar to a small child having toy soldiers and toy tanks and playing war today, right, and setting those up. Now, it's not clear whether this whole model fit on this clay brick or whether the brick represented the whole thing, right? We don't really know because he's acting this out. But the outline of the city would have been easily recognizable by those that Ezekiel was talking to. He couldn't talk, but he could write. He may have even labeled the brick as Jerusalem. So they knew what he was talking about. But he builds up this elaborate model of the city and this attack by these toy soldiers and battering rams and all these things around it. Verse 3, then take an iron pan and place it as an iron wall between you and the city. And then turn your face toward this pan, and it will be under siege. You shall besiege it, and this will be a sign to the people of Israel. So after constructing this model, now Ezekiel is to place this iron plate between himself and this model of this city and then pretend like he's laying siege to the city. And this would be a sign to the people of what God was going to do to the real Jerusalem. Now, the meaning of the iron plate or iron pan is debatable because a lot of meaning behind it, but it appears as though this was like a cooking griddle. So a flat plate, so to speak. And priests used to use these griddles to bake the grain for the grain offerings in the temple. So this is something that was readily available to Ezekiel because he was a priest. So this plate between him and the city, it represents a barrier that exists between the people and God. Ezekiel is representing God. The city he drew out on this brick, and then this plate goes between them. That's the barrier. Their sin had erected a barrier between themselves in the city and God, represented by Ezekiel. And remember, Ezekiel built this model, this whole scene, without speaking a word or explaining what he's doing. Remember, he was also confined to his house, so at this point he's probably outside of his house when he does this. But he's setting the stage for this oracle to come. And then we see another visual here in verses 4 through 8 of Ezekiel having to lay on his side. So verse 4, God says, "Then lie on your left side and put the sin of the people of Israel upon yourself. You are to bear their sin for the number of days that you lay on your side. And I have assigned you the same number of days as the years of their sin. So for 390 days, you will bear the sin of the people of Israel." So Ezekiel here is to recline in public on his left side for over a year, 390 days. And what that was to represent was the number of years that Israel had to bear punishment for their sins. 390 years. Every day represented a year. So he's having to lay on his side, on his left side, which would have meant he faced north, the northern kingdom, Israel. And so by facing north, his body would have been pointing west towards Jerusalem. So this is the visual of what God is calling him to do here. Remember, this is a commission by God to Ezekiel that we looked at in chapters 2 and 3. That this is what I want you to do, and if you don't do it, their blood is on your hands. So now he has to lie on his side for 390 days. Verse 6. After you have finished doing that, then lie down again on your right side and bear the sin of the people of Judah. And this time I have assigned to you 40 days, a day for each year. Turn your face toward the siege of Jerusalem with a bared arm to prophesy against them. So after laying on his left side for 390 days, Ezekiel is to now lay on his right side for an additional 40 days. And this was to represent the number of additional years that the southern kingdom, Judah, was going to have to suffer punishment for their sins. And this time he is to face Jerusalem with his arm bared, which signifies God's anger towards the people. In verse 8, "And then I will tie you up with ropes so that you cannot turn from one side to the other until you have finished the days of your siege." So God is promising to help Ezekiel lay on his side here by restraining his movements. The ropes would bind him into his position. So this isn't a punishment of being bound in ropes. This is to help him lay still. Now, it appears that he did this, Ezekiel laid on his side, but this wasn't 24/7 around the clock. It appears that he only acted this drama out for a few hours each day, and it was during that time that God enabled him to lie quietly by restraining him with these ropes. The whole point of this imagery is that it's God's judgment on sin. God was going to judge the sin of the people. That God's judgment on sin is inevitable. He is long suffering, verses 1 through 8, but and God may wait for years before he punishes, but ultimately God is going to dispense judgment. We see that all throughout the Bible. And that judgment includes judgment on his people. And then in verses 9 through 17, we see this second drama taking place. So the first was to build this model of Jerusalem on this clay brick and build this army around it, and then lie next to it and put a plate between it and you, and lay on your left side 390 times and on your right side another 40 times. That was the first drama, signifying the separation that sin has caused between the people and God. Now we see this second drama, which is going to deal with food. And this took place while Ezekiel was acting out the first 390 days of the siege, right, that we just looked at. So as the main drama pictured in the siege was judgment from God, here, the drama here in this act stresses the severe conditions that are going to exist in the city during the siege. So verse 9, take wheat and barley and beans and lentils and millet and spelt, and underline those really quick, or make a quick note of those ingredients. Take wheat, barley, beans, lentils, millet, spelt, put them in a storage jar, use them to make bread for yourself. Now, why did I say, underline those? And maybe you know this, but if you go to your store, your grocery store, and to the bread aisle, if you find Ezekiel bread, which is readily available in most stores, it's made of these ingredients. That's why it's called Ezekiel bread. It doesn't have a lot of the additives and the preservatives that is in like a regular loaf of bread. So it's really interesting. We can get this stuff today. If you want to eat this type of bread, look for Ezekiel bread. But anyhow, going back, take these ingredients, put them in a jar. This is what you're going to use to make bread. You are to eat this bread during the 390 days that you are lying on your side. So Ezekiel is to make provisions for himself so that he would have adequate food to eat while he's laying on his side for 390 days. Now, why not the entire 430 days, right? Because he's 390 days on his left side, 40 days on his right side. So why not make provision for all 430 days? Well, one explanation is that these other 40 days are omitted just for the sake of brevity being written here in this account. So the implication is, make enough provision for the whole time, but we're not going to spell it all out again. Another explanation is that perhaps God, out of his mercy, shortened this time where Ezekiel had to lie on his side and maybe removed that 40-day period. We don't really know, but either way, he is to make provision out of these ingredients so he has bread to eat. Verse 10. And then weigh out 20 shekels of food to eat each day, and eat it at the prescribed time. So God prescribed what Ezekiel should consume each day and how much he should consume each day, which was about 1 1/3 pints of water and about 8 ounces of bread. That's not very much. A pint of water and 8 ounces of bread is minuscule. What that represents, those are famine rations, because this famine is going to come on the people. So this is some symbolism, right? Verse 11. And also measure out 1/6 of a hin of water and drink that at the set time. So his bread was to be a combination of these 6 grains rather than just one. And that's what people during a siege, this is how they would have had to make their bread, out of these 6 grains. And they would mix these small amounts of grains rather than a larger quantity of a single grain. And then he had this minuscule amount of water, a sixth of a hin. So what he's mixing his ingredients with is this small amount of water. So the dough, there's not much to the dough. 8 ounces of dough is all he has to work with, and then just a very little amount of water. And so Ezekiel, he may have eaten at other times of the day when he was not acting out this drama, but while he was acting out the drama, while he was lying on his side, acting out this presentation, he only ate and drank as people would do during the siege in Jerusalem. So he's not being punished here. He's not having to fast or starve himself. This is all representative to the people of what was going to come. Lay on your side 390 days. Each day represents a year. And this is all you're going to eat. The famine rations, right? Verse 12. Eat the food as you would a loaf of barley bread. Bake it in the sight of the people using human excrement for fuel. So now how do you bake the bread, right? Well, Ezekiel was to bake this bread over a fire that was made with human excrement, which represents what the people of Jerusalem during the time of the siege would have had to do. They wouldn't have had any other way to build fire. The only way to do it was to use human excrement. And we'll come back to this. Verse 13. Then the Lord said, in this way, by doing that, the people of Israel will eat defiled food among the nations where I will drive them. So the food didn't only represent the type of food they would have to eat, this Ezekiel bread, but the fact that they have to eat unclean food, this defiled food, it's a slap in the face. So again, Ezekiel laying on his side. Was he laying on his side continually throughout the 24 hours of every day? No, probably not, because how is he going to prepare a meal if he's laying on his side? So again, this is representation, right? This is drama being acted out. He can't talk, so he's just doing this theater of like a mime, right? And he's doing this and doing that. But we'll come back to this baking bread over human excrement. Verse 14, and then I said, and this isn't a verbal because he can't talk, but he's complaining spiritually to God. No, sovereign Lord, I have never defiled myself, because cooking food over human excrement is defiling yourself. From my youth until now, I have never eaten anything found dead or torn by wild animals. No impure meat has ever entered my mouth. So he's complaining, he's defending himself, right? I've never eaten unclean food before, Lord. Verse 15, very well, he said, God says, okay, fine, I will let you bake your bread over cow dung instead of human excrement. So God graciously allows Ezekiel to prepare his food over a fire that is fueled by cow excrement rather than human excrement. And that is not an uncommon thing even today in the Middle East, where there are still people who use dried animal dung as fuel because of the scarcity of wood. So God is granting Ezekiel's request to substitute dried animal feces for human feces because Ezekiel wants to preserve his own purity. And God, this is not a punishment again to Ezekiel. God's not trying to get Ezekiel to violate his priestly responsibilities. He's trying to remind him and the people of how many compromises of what is usual and normal would have to be made by the Israelites who are going to be cooped up in Jerusalem, that are under this overwhelming pressure by the Babylonians. It's again, this is symbolic, right? God is trying to teach the people, this is what's going to come. This is what is going to happen. What Ezekiel is acting out by making this small amount of bread and having to lie on his side and eat these famine provisions and cook his food over human excrement. This is what is coming to you. Verse 16. He then said to me, Son of man, I am about to cut off the food supply in Jerusalem, right? So that's the symbolism right there that we just looked at. The people will eat rationed food in anxiety. They will drink rationed water in despair, right? Small amounts of bread, very small amounts of water every day. For food and water, they will both be scarce. Famine, right? Famine follows war. They will be appalled at the sight of each other, and they will waste away because of their sin. So all these conditions were to symbolize how the Israelites in Jerusalem were going to have to eat in order to live during the siege. They would have to eat sparingly because there was going to be war. The Babylonians were going to attack. A result of that war was going to be famine, right? The Israelites were going to be left with nothing. Food, we looked at that all throughout Jeremiah and Lamentations. Food was going to be scarce. What little food they had, it was going to be defiled. That is chapter 4 of Ezekiel. Now we move into chapter 5, and we see the next drama being laid out here by Ezekiel. So Ezekiel is to represent the siege of Jerusalem here that we saw in chapter 4. After he represents the fact of the siege in verses 1 through 3, and the length of the siege, verses 4 through 8, and the severity of the siege, verses 9 through 17, all of chapter 4. After he represents all of that, now he's going to demonstrate the result of the siege, and that's what we see here in the first part of chapter 5. So verse 1, chapter 5. And now, son of man, take a sharp sword, use it as a barber's razor, to shave your head and your beard, and then take a set of scales and divide up the hair. This is a very interesting symbolic act here we're going to look at. Ezekiel is to shave the hair off of his head and shave the beard off of his face using a sword. Can't imagine what that felt like. But what that symbolizes is the defilement and the humiliation that was going to come on Jerusalem because of their sin. Shaving the head was forbidden for the Israelites under the law, under Deuteronomy 14. Shaving off the beard was forbidden. Those were pagan practices, shaving the head, shaving the beard, that expressed great grief, but it also expressed humiliation. If an Israelite priest, and remember Ezekiel's a priest, he's a prophet and a priest. If a priest shaved his head, under Leviticus 21, he was defiled, he was no longer holy to the Lord. And so this act of Ezekiel shaving his head and his beard, it's a picture of shame and disgrace and the unclean condition of Israel in the face of God. And it's a removal from the presence of God. This was defilement. This was shameful humiliation. Verse 2, and when the days of your siege come to an end, burn a third of the hair that you just shaved off inside the city. Take a third, strike it with the sword all around the city, and scatter another third to the wind, because I will pursue them with drawn sword. So Ezekiel is to shave his head, shave his beard with a sword. He's to act out first, though. Remember, follow the timeline. Build this model of Jerusalem, and for 430 days, act out this siege of the city. And then shave your head, shave your beard. So it's not bad enough that they've been defeated and they are living under famine. Now they're going to be humiliated. Take the hair that you just shaved, divide it into 3 equal piles using a scale. Using a scale and weighing the hair symbolizes evaluation and this coming judgment, right? This is everything in these words has meaning. So it's really easy to gloss over these. So I hope this is helping. But when these 430 days of siege were done, which we saw in chapter 4, he's to take his hair, burn a third of it in the center of this model of Jerusalem that he just made, and then take another third and chop it up and lay it outside the city, and then the other third, throw it up into the air so the wind blows it away. That all represents the fate of the Israelites in Jerusalem, both before, during, and after the siege. 1/3 of the Israelites would die in the burning and the destruction of the city. That's the first third that he was to burn in this model. We saw that in 2 Kings, a third would die in the burning, the destruction of the city. A second third would die at the hand of the Babylonian soldiers outside the city. That was the second third of hair to be scattered around the model of the city. We saw that in 2 Kings 25 and in 2 Chronicles 36. And then another third, the final third, would be thrown into the air. What that represents is the Israelites going into captivity, driven into captivity by the soldiers of Babylon that God had sent there. That this is all symbolic of what was to come. Verse 3. But out of all that hair, take a few of your hairs, tuck them away in the folds of your garment. And again, take a few of these hairs that you're tucking away, throw them into the fire and burn them up. A fire will spread from there to all Israel. So Ezekiel is to take a few of these hairs from this last group that was to be thrown into the air, hide them in the hems of his robe. Now, what does that symbolize? It symbolizes the remnant that God was going to preserve in this captivity. Remember in Jeremiah, not all of the Israelites left Judah. There were still the poorest of the poor left behind. That's what these few hairs represent. But out of those hairs, throw some into the fire. That represents the fact that God was going to judge some of that remnant. The fire of judgment that would burn in Jerusalem would then spread this judgment to judge the entirety of the nation Israel. So this is all symbolism of what was to come. That fulfillment did indeed come when Jerusalem was destroyed. And now in verses 5 through 17, we see the interpretation of all of these acts. So Ezekiel's explanation of this drama would come verbally at the end of the drama, meaning it would come at the time of the destruction of the real Jerusalem, because at that point, Ezekiel was no longer silent. So verse 5, this is what the sovereign Lord says. This is Jerusalem, which I have set in the center of the nations, with countries all around her. Yet in her wickedness she has rebelled against my laws and my decrees more than the nations and the countries around her. She has rejected my laws. She has not followed my decrees. God is explaining the center of this drama is Jerusalem, which God had set apart to be a messenger for the world. But that never happened. The Israelites over time conformed to the pagan practices of the countries around them. And again, the Israelites doubted this was going to happen. They hoped that, this drama that Ezekiel was acting out, this city under siege, it's not Jerusalem, it's Babylon, right? They're hoping it's something else. But this is misguided hope. It's completely off base. God had always intended for Israel, the nation, to be the great missionary to the nations of the world. But they had sinned against God. They had rebelled against God. They had been unfaithful to his covenant through Moses, that I will be your God. You will be my people. I will take you to this land of promise. You will be a messenger of to the nations of who I am. Never happened. They never did that, and now their status as being the city of God, they have forfeited that. So now we're going to see this explanation. And I'm going to move through these next several verses fairly quickly, but I'll explain them as we go. So verse 7. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. You have been more, and God is speaking to Jerusalem, to the Israelites. You have been more unruly than the nations around you. You have not followed my decrees or kept my laws. You have not even conformed to the standards of the nations around you that I have set. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I myself am against you, Jerusalem, and I will inflict punishment on you in the sight of the nations. God is promising to judge Jerusalem, not in private, but in view of all the other nations watching, because they have been so unfaithful, so rebellious. They hadn't even obeyed the common laws of their neighbors around them. Verse 9, because of all your detestable idols, I will do to you what I have never done before and will never do again. Therefore, in your midst, parents will eat their children, children will eat their parents. I will inflict punishment on you, and I will scatter all your survivors to the winds. The Lord would punish Jerusalem uniquely for her sins. Fathers would eat their own sons. Sons would eat their own fathers. This is going to be a horrible time. God is saying, I've never done it before, nor will it ever happen again. But this is coming on you as judgment, Jerusalem, and then I'm going to scatter your remnant from this land of promise. Verse 11, therefore, as surely as I live, declares the sovereign Lord, because you have defiled my sanctuary with all your vile images and detestable practices, I myself will shave you, and I will not look on you with pity, and I will not spare you. God's affirming he will withdraw his presence from his people because they had defiled his temple with their idols. And this clause, as surely as I live, in verse 11, it expresses a very solemn oath. And those words appear more than in Ezekiel, more than any other prophetic book. Those words appear 14 times throughout Ezekiel. God is not going to have pity on his people. Verse 12, a third of your people will die of the plague or will perish by famine inside the city. A third will fall by the sword outside the walls. A third I will scatter to the winds, and I will pursue with drawn swords. What we just looked at, Ezekiel's drama with the hair. A third burned up, a third cut down, and a third scattered. A third would die by plague or famine. A third will die by the sword. A third will be scattered from the land. It's exactly what Ezekiel just demonstrated. It's exactly what God is now saying to the people. Verse 13, and then my anger will cease, and then my wrath against them will subside, and I will be avenged. So these judgments that are going to come would satisfy the Lord's anger against his people. And they would convince the people of God's wrath because of their sins. There should be a wake-up for all of them. And when I have spent my wrath on them, then they will know that I, the Lord, have spoken in my zeal. This final statement in verse 13 is the key to the whole chapter. If not key to Ezekiel's ministry, it's the key to the entire chapter of this book. And when I have spent my wrath, they will know that I am the Lord. Verse 14. I will make you a ruin and a reproach among the nations around you in the sight of all who pass by. That was a message throughout Jeremiah. You will be a reproach and a taunt, a warning and an object of horror to the nations around you when I inflict punishment on you in anger and in wrath, and with stinging rebuke, I, the Lord, have spoken. God would desolate the people and make them an abhorrence to the nations. The nations would revile the Israelites. They would use this as a warning of the consequences of unfaithfulness to the covenant with God. God is promising this will happen. And those who do not observe the judgment of God's mouth will not escape the judgment of God's hand. This is going to come. It's going to happen. God is making it very clear through Ezekiel what is about to happen. You would think they would get it, but they just the Israelites, they just didn't get it. They didn't believe this would happen to them. Verse 16. And when I shoot at you with my deadly and destructive arrows of famine, I will shoot to destroy you. I will bring more and more famine upon you, and I will cut off your supply of food. In the wilderness, God provided manna. Here, he's removing everything. Verse 17, and I will send famine. I will send wild beasts against you. They will leave you childless. Plague and bloodshed will sweep through you, and I will bring the sword against you. I, the Lord, have spoken. God would send these famines, which would attack them like arrows, to destroy the people. And these arrows, this famine would hit their mark. They weren't going to miss. And wild beasts would come in, and plague would come in, and disease would come in, and cannibalism would come in, and war, and these would all be instruments God would use to judge the people. These are the curses that were outlined through the covenant made with Moses. That unfaithfulness to that covenant would bring these things. And the people had been unfaithful to the covenant. God had been patient and merciful and did not bring immediate judgment over centuries. This built up. God gave many, many opportunities for repentance. The people snubbed their noses at that. And now they are under the judgment of God, and there's nothing anybody is going to do about it, because all of this God had promised to do. And that is Ezekiel chapters 4 and 5, and I pray that that has been a help to you. And I just want to jump ahead here really quick. When you read these books of Jeremiah and Lamentations and Ezekiel and Daniel and you see the hopelessness of the people, the announcement of the Messiah's birth with Jesus being born, now you see the hope that really comes out of that, because without a Savior being born, there is no hope. It's complete hopelessness. And so as we come in soon to the Thanksgiving season here in a couple days, and in November at least, and soon into the season of Advent, I hope this gives a different perspective to what Advent should really mean, the coming of a Savior. Because what is taking place here in the lives of the Israelites is just complete desolation. So thank you for being here this evening. Again, I do pray that this has been a help to you, and I appreciate you being here. Tomorrow we will look at chapters 6 and 7. We'll look at this coming judgment on Judah, and we'll wrap up the week. And again, we are well underway into the book of Ezekiel. So thank you for being here. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Till then, take care, and God bless. Bye-bye.